Hello everyone, welcome to Sadurdays, episode 15, the season finale. For today's episode, we have 3 sad stories for you. They're fairly short apparently, but some may be shorter or longer than others. So for this episode, we've gone back to the reedsy blog to see what they have for us. And so we have 3 stories, one called You Won't Like Me, which was my favorite of the picks. Anything else is pretty much as it should be, yeah. So let's begin. This one's by Scott Skinner. And I should mention, reedsy has a weekly contest where you can win $50 if they feature your piece on their blog. So that's pretty cool, and they have these story prompts, and that's what these people are writing to. For this prompt, it's about a story involving a character who cannot return home. And just a disclaimer, some of these stories may or may not contain things that are triggering in some way, especially if you've been a victim of things or whatnot. So, my suggestion is, if you're particularly sensitive, it's best to stay off of here. Otherwise, listen at your own risk. My whole life I've been a quitter. The years I lived are rich with mistakes that cause me to gag whenever they flash, and they flash often despite my numerous attempts to numb them. The memories of my mistakes are unrelenting. They continually stab at my psyche and have left me tattered and helpless. But of course I'm to blame. I did the things that turn into the memories that haunt me, no matter how far removed I am from them. I forget the good times, not the bad, and try to forgive others, but I cannot forgive myself. I used to tell my family that I hated my life. I've come to realize this isn't true. It's not my life that I hate, it's me. I hate me. I haven't brushed my teeth in 4 days, and I think I just saw my ex-wife and daughter drive past the street meeting where I'd been panhandling. My mother was there when I first quit something. Mother's always there. They're always watching their kids fail. It was Little League, and the coach brought us in after we lost another game. The other 7-year-olds and I took a knee and sat cross-legged in left field as the coach told us that we needed to do better. Everyone always wants better. My mom watched from behind the dugout as I got up and told the coach that I quit. Afterwards, I sat in the back of our white Chevrolet Astro van. My mother told me she was proud that I stood up for myself. I didn't need her reassurance because I had the compulsion to opt out even at the young age. Happened again with sports in high school. This time it was tennis. My dad was rated 6.0 by the USTA because he played at a Division I college back in his day. He forced me to play, and when I saw him on weekends, I didn't play well enough. He'd slam strings of his Wilson Pro Staff racket on the top of my head. Strangers on the court would see him hit me, but no one ever said anything. After the matches against my father, which he'd always win, I'd tell myself I'd never play again, and I regret that I didn't make good on that self-talk until after he killed himself. He crashed his car when he was drunk and died on impact. It was Tuesday. Later that month at a regional tournament, I told the coach I was quitting. He begged me to compete because if I quit, they'd have to forfeit, and that would ruin our talented players' chances of moving ahead to state championship. In a rare act of kindness, I played in the tournament, but I double-faulted every serve and didn't bother to return opponent's serve at all. Bystanders in the crowd gasped at my pestilent performance. My play would have really hurt my dad. I wish he could have seen it. Panhandling is similar to every job I've ever done. I have my good days, but most of them are bad, and I'm still doing it. I wish I was doing something else. The root of the work, the why, is identical to the previous jobs I've quit. My last job was in tech, and I was an account manager. My goal was to get your money. It's the same as a panhandler. Only the service I'm offering is different. I'm not selling you software. I'm selling you an opportunity to feel different, to feel better about yourself, for having compassion. It would do any doubter good to stand at a streetlight with a piece of cardboard and beg. If they did, they might understand that we are all mendicants, regardless of how we fill our days. So many people do things they don't want to do because they have to. Much pride to do otherwise. I don't have this problem. My pride bled out many years ago. Patterns have emerged as I've aged because of my hindsight over the decades of my life. I see that the extent of this habitual quitting goes beyond recreational activities and employment. I quit people too. I often reason that the termination of my relationships is warranted based on the other person's behavior. It's only now I see that I willed the disbandment. In the early 2000s, when I called women bitches and wore much baggier clothes, a woman labeled me as passive-aggressive after talking to me for 5 minutes. It was the first time I'd heard the term. Although I don't remember any other parts of that night, I could still see the disgust on her face as she explained all the reasons why I was destined to be miserable. Backhanded compliments, hiding anger, sarcasm, playing the victim, making excuses, etc. I have no friends because I made it that way, and I made it that way because I'm passive-aggressive. I keep it that way because I've convinced myself I don't like people. And I bet all of this is customary behavior for individuals like me who hate everything they are. In college, my best friend Jack died of an Oxycontin overdose. I borrowed a Louis Vuitton tie from another friend to wear to Jack's funeral. He gave me the tie, which came in a box like it was brand new, and asked I be careful with it. Naturally, I ignored him, and on the night of the funeral, when I was drunk and angry at the world for killing Jack, I threw the $220 tie out the window of a moving car. When I got back to college, and the tie-giving friend called me, I ignored him. A week later, when I saw him at the party, asked for the tie. I told him, "You're probably never going to get it back." I've treated other friends in a similar manner, discarding our relationships like a borrowed tie. At every job I've ever had, people tried to be friendly with me. They act like they're curious about my life, my interests, my dreams, my 5-year plan. They ask these questions to try to understand who I am, but I've never liked the idea that they could know such a thing. Before I was a father, my thinking was that no one knows who they are. But after watching my daughter grow, I've changed my position. Only children understand who they are. I don't know the exact age when life strips people of their existence, but I assume that happens when they enter the workforce. Tell me about it. The issue with people is they make you think you're not only who you think you are, but how they see you too. I've been told I was funny, told I was a hard worker, told I was an A player, a good person. I was told I was enough. None of it is true. I read somewhere that people during the second half of their life become the reverse of who they were in the first. I disagree. I think people who are shitty stay shitty, and everyone else is probably shitty too. They're just better at asking questions. Panhandling is counterintuitive. You expect generosity from the luxury logos, but it's usually brands like Toyota, Kia, or Honda that give. Today I panhandled on Monument Boulevard under 680 freeway for 3 hours to get $10. The largest sum I got at once, $4, was from a black woman in an older Toyota Camry. As she placed the money in the palm of my dirty hand, she said, "God bless." There's much more talk about God around me now that I'm homeless, and it doesn't just come from people who donate. The vagrants in downtown cling to religion, and when they're feeling hopeful, they often speak of what God will do for them. I stay away from that type of talk because when I'm around it, I get the urge to shout out that all sins are unforgivable. In general, I avoid the other bums because they're territorial. Living on the streets is dangerous. One time I didn't yield a panhandling spot quick enough, and the guy named Terrence socked me in the face till I spit up blood, but I prefer to dwell on other failings. You can't live in fear. I'm going to use some of my earnings on toothpaste and a toothbrush since my pack, which had toiletries in it, was stolen, probably by one of the bums that pray for mercy. Rite Aid doesn't let me in because of my smell. I'm able to get into Safeway, but I'm quickly told to leave by an employee who caught me using the restrooms to clean myself a few weeks back. There's nothing else legit in walking distance, so I got a Fast and Easy Mart liquor store, which I wanted to avoid due to the limited selection and markup of personal care items. I'm a repeat customer, so the cashier knows me. And I like him because even though we see each other every other week, he doesn't try to get familiar. With my money, I purchased a travel-sized tube of Aquafresh toothpaste. Crest toothbrush, a Mickey's 40 ounce, and a 12-ounce bottle of Ice Mountain drinking water, the cheapest brand available. Cashier has a Mern turban on a Bluetooth device in his left ear. He doesn't say hi or bye to me. It's almost like I don't exist at all, which is the way I prefer to be treated. When I got married, I knew I was going to get divorced. Even as I was saying my vows, I could feel all of the mothers expecting me to fail. The saying goes, if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. I like to think that I loved my wife, but then again, I don't know what love is. Having a child which is supposed to make one's heart swell, make them feel an overwhelming sense of love, only provided me with more material to add to my internal list of reasons for hating myself. I was never good enough to be a dad, and surely wasn't good at being one. I was always negative in front of my daughter. It was completely unwarranted and happened organically as a byproduct of my self-absorption. Countless times when she deserved the spotlight, I'd steal it. She didn't get the praise she deserved when I was in the room. There was a season when I tried to stop being like this. I tried to hide this corrosiveness that possessed me, but I couldn't keep it up for more than a couple of weeks. The truth of who I am always bubbles to the surface. It's clear. Like when you see someone double fault on purpose. I stand in the back parking lot of a Jiffy Lube, shoving the Crest toothbrush in and out of my mouth, foolishly expecting to gain a sense of satisfaction from fresh breath. Instead, brushing triggers flashes of the ways I destroyed my marriage. I was always telling my ex to leave me. I'd tell her in the morning, I'd tell her at night, I'd scream it, I'd say it calmly. She didn't listen, which made the destruction much more painful for our family. I fell into a pattern where I'd quit a job and be unemployed for a month or so, during which I'd drink the days away and ignore all responsibilities. She took money out of our savings to cover my half of the mortgage, and this happened many times until we burned through a third of our nest egg. She was forced to agree that leaving me was the best thing for the family. Even then, she didn't go down easy. She wanted us to go to therapy. She wanted me to see a doctor. She begged and begged me to tell her how she could help. She just wanted me to get better. Everyone always wants better. One of the last times we spoke, I asked her if she'd admit that until death do us part was bullshit, but she refused. She told me with tears running down her face, death do us part is true. The man I married is dead. 3 months after that, I was on the streets. This flash makes me angry. And the toothbrush's head jabs the back of my throat, making me gag until I throw up. When I find it hard to drink alcohol, I call myself a bitch. The first sips of the 40 ounce, which mixed with the bile and mint taste in my mouth, are followed by just that. Then I force another pull from the bottle. I've moved from the Jiffy Lube parking lot into a section of the 680 freeway that's flat and dry because the weather's turned. It's the only covered place available. The area is claimed by Terrence, who I've done a good job at avoiding since he smashed my face in. I know I'm taking a risk, but there's no other place for me to go. I drink the Mickeys in rapid succession, hoping to catch a buzz that will get me through the night. It's very cold, and because my pack was stolen, I don't have a sweatshirt, jacket, or knife. All the things I need to protect me. Within half an hour, the 40 ounce is gone, and I'm swaying as I pee into the rain. Above me is the sound of cars going 65 miles per hour on the freeway. I can hear their tires kick up water, and the raindrops on the hoods of their cars. There's the pitter-patter all over me, and my body rushes with hot blood when I realize what I'm hearing isn't just rain, but footsteps. I quit peeing it and turn around. It's Terrence. He calls me a fuckboy and asks if I know where I am. Even in the dark of the night under the freeway surrounded by rain, I can see his terrifying eyes. He's with another guy I've never seen before, and this younger girl who's known for being a whore. Till turns I'm leaving, but that doesn't stop him from walking towards me with his fists clenched. Two others follow close behind him, and I notice the whore has on my backpack. With the courage of the 40 ounce in my belly, I tell her to give me my backpack. She responds by telling me to go suck her dick. I tell her I don't want herpes, I just want the bag. Next thing I know, my back is against a pillar that holds up on the freeway, and Terrence is lunging at me with a pocket knife. I'm too drunk to defend myself, so he ends up sticking my left thigh. I shriek in pain and try to run away, but before I can get clear of him, the other guy tackles me and starts punching me in the back of the head and ears. Then I feel the whore kick me in the ribs with her small feet. Terrence goes through my pockets and finds my toothbrush and toothpaste and takes them. And as the beating continues, I don't even try to fight back. I've never been a fighter, I'm a quitter. I'm at Sequoia Elementary School now, sitting in an outdoor hallway that's covered by an aluminum roof. My pants are soaked in blood from the shell of stab wound. My face is throbbing and swollen. One of my ribs feels broken. If the cops come, I'll be arrested, but this is the only place left I can think of to keep out of the rain. I never come to this part of the town because it's where my ex-wife lives. I hobbled past her house, our old house, to get there, and my daughter's light was still on in her room. I thought of what it might be like if I were inside, what it might be like if I weren't who I am. That thing I read about people becoming the reverse of who they were in the first half of their lives sounds pretty good right now. Everyone always wants better, even me. I've made so many mistakes, but it's hard to know if homelessness is a blunder or the rest of my life. I think there's a way back to the old me, a way back home. I just have to try harder. Maybe I can start fresh tomorrow. No, something deep inside of me says you're probably never going to get it back. And that was You Won't Like Me. Final thoughts? Very, very pitiable, and beautifully envelops, the common sight that I've seen, even more common depending on where I go. We see these people with their grunts and their, but we forget sometimes that though we struggle to get a roof over our heads, the fact remains, if we didn't have some of the supports we did, or we didn't have all that we had going for us, we could just as easily be them. I'm reminded by that fact all the time, considering I'm just kind of a minimum wage worker at the moment, but I'm working towards something better. And that's pretty much the gist of it and whatnot. So yeah. We take life one day at a time at some level. And now our next story, always almost home. Submitted for contest number 98 in response to write a story for a character who cannot return home by Lavender Z. Ashlyn. This is a lesbian romance, sad, so... Yeah, funny, it just happens to be Pride Month when I'm doing this one. I didn't plan it that way. I'm just looking at what's on the front page when I'm capturing these stories. Home, it wasn't a place, it was a person, or rather a feeling. It was the feeling of the silky bunny hat that you let me wear on that chilly December walk home, or feeling your hands on my waist when we slow danced in your screened-in porch. Home dripped from the stars, beautiful and close with the comforting night sky until it was swallowed with the lucent rays of sun. Home killed me when I found myself in that high school parking lot, miles away from you, lodged itself into me and refused to let me breathe until I learned to live without oxygen. Home. I haven't been there in more than a decade. Ashlyn's hair was drenched, and now her windshield was clouded, leaving barely more than streaks of red and blue from the cars around her. This was the curse of rain. Rain wasn't always bad, though. She remembered biking to Astrid's house as the storm began. Seeing Astrid wet and shivering, her dark hair clinging to her soaked dress, waiting for her at the edge of the field, Ashlyn knew that Astrid hated rain. She still waited for her and clasped Ashlyn's hand as the two shrieked with joy, running uphill to the screened-in porch as rain bucketed down. Once they got there, the two would watch the summer storm drift across the countryside, sitting in comfortable silence as the rain drenched the outside world. Shimmering droplets like liquid crystals falling from the sky. That was 10 years ago before. And now Ashlyn was in Astrid's basement, helping her kids take off their rain jackets. This was their first day of babysitting and the first day of her librarian job. Ashlyn had no idea that Astrid lived here and that she had a husband and 3 adopted children. But now the sky had split open. The rain poured down relentlessly from the outside, and she'd heard muffled sounds of an argument between Astrid and her husband coming from downstairs. As Ashlyn wondered why they were so upset, she felt a tug on her sweater. She looked down to see Olive, the youngest child, staring up at her. "Orange juice?" she asked. Olive had drinking the citrus beverage at least 4 times today. "Are you sure?" Ashlyn let out a laugh, even though the gradually increasing volume of the fight from downstairs made her tense. "Please," the 4-year-old pleaded. "All right, I'll get you some," Ashlyn agreed. Walking down the stairs, Olive trailing behind as the two walked to the kitchen, they were greeted with the sounds of screaming and glass crashing. "Please, Elijah," Esther shouted at her husband. "Just this once. Please do it for me. I take care of the kids all the time. You never..." "But I can't cancel this. Do you know how much I cancel for you?" As they continued to shout, Ashlyn tried to pour the drink for Olive, who was looking up at her with big, worried eyes as quickly as possible. "You know what, Ashlyn, want to go on a road trip with me? Because I can't handle this right now." She looked at her childhood friend pleadingly, reminding Ashlyn of Olive's eyes when she asked for orange juice. But this was different. Her friend was in pain. She hadn't seen her in so long. Actually, a road trip sounded perfect. "You know what, fine, I need space too. Leave me here stranded with the kid. You know what, fine, I need space too. Leave me here stranded with the kids. Oh, God forbid leaving a father with his kids." And just like that, Astrid slammed the door and Ashlyn and Astrid were off. Box peeking out of the door compartment. She picked it up. It was an empty cigarette box, light pink with a pattern of painted cherry blossoms arching out from the corner. "Do you smoke?" she asked her old friend as they began driving down the winding gravel road. "No," Astrid said, her eyebrows coming together in concentration as she drove through a thin patch of road. "But I used to. Did you see the cherry box?" "Yes," Ashlyn said, looking out the window at the citrus-colored sky and the clouds glimmering with orange at their corners. Ashlyn was glad Astrid wasn't harming her health. The relief was interwoven with the deep, quiet ache of all the things she'd missed with Astrid. The fact she never knew when or why she smoked, along with everything else she wasn't around for. Then, as the planet of love buzzed around her, Ashlyn could only take comfort in the fact it was pouring rain. Ashlyn was stranded on our first day at the new high school without any ounce of familiarity. Without Astrid, the most important person in the world to her, Valentine's Day used to be sweet, sugary, and perfectly generic, tasting like candy. Astrid and Ashlyn traded on the bus as the sun began to rise. Last year the clouds looked like cotton candy, and Ashlyn sat close to Astrid. But their shoulders were touching. Electricity had coursed through her like a sugar rush. But not anymore. Now it felt like the deep throb of loneliness in her chest and bitter coffee. The only thing that could get Ashlyn out of bed. Ashlyn tried not to cry. Not a single person greeted her, not that it would fix anything. But all around her the sky wept until there was nothing left. Until the clouds were hollow and had to scrape out their insides. The sky was bitter and cold. As Astrid drove out onto the highway, Ashlyn turned with a small box in her hand, looking at the tiny, intricate petals of painted blossoms. "You know, I haven't thought about that cigarette box in a while." Astrid began, a smile forming at her lips. "But it was beautiful. That's why I kept it. Then, even just walking out into the rainy, starry sky, Ashlyn immediately thought of the constellations of freckles on Astrid's face, ones that only appeared at summer, the silver streaks of hair that Astrid had dyed near her ears, everything connected back to her somehow. Ashlyn tilted her head upwards, and the sky covered in stars liquefied by tears she had tried to push away all day. More and more tears slipped down her cheeks, becoming synonymous with the rain pouring down on her. Ashlyn stood shivering in the empty parking lot, her hair and clothes slowly getting drenched, staring up at the stars, even when the lonely, aching pain opened up her chest, even when it took over her whole body. That night the two headed to a hotel to sleep in. Astrid and Ashlyn sat side by side on the bed. Astrid reading a fantasy novel. Astrid loved fantasy, while Ashlyn was typically partial to more realistic novels. However, tonight she had started to read the sequel to A Queen in Exile. Then it was an unlikely pair. Two girls sat in the classroom. Astrid always hung out with the popular kids until recently, when she started eating lunch alone. The two had never talked before. Still, the way the sunlight streamed through the windows gave Ashlyn a rush of inspiration. you like to read? Astrid smiled, her eyes sparkling. Yes, have you heard of The Queen in Exile? The two girls talked the rest of the period, Astrid telling her all about her favorite book, The Queen in Exile. The two began sitting at lunch together, their heads bent over Astrid's well-worn copy of a thick fantasy novel. Even though Ashlyn had always been partial to realistic fiction prior, the captivating way the book was written swept both of them into faraway lands. A few weeks later, when Ashlyn had the stomach flu, Astrid was right by her side, getting her water and reading about sword fights and royal drama and queens that rode dragons. The book ended with the cruel cliffhanger in which the princess is sent to war. Both of the girls lost hope of a sequel after a few years had passed. Still, it was comforting to be near Astrid as Ashlyn scribbled down, revising and revising. Zany had been at war for years, at least that's how it seemed. When the troops had first marched out to war, Zany's stomach had been bloated from her son, born just a few weeks prior, and the flurries of snow glistened in the cold air, coating her silky hair with white. At that point, Zany had never seen death. She was surrounded by life. She was going to give her son the world. Zany would never be that person again. Except with spread up parks and picnic blankets, and now sitting atop a picnic table, the sky began to flower. As the two sat at the picnic table, Ashlyn noticed a sunset casted colors over Astrid. The lightest tint of pink outlined her face with buttery golden colors swirled with blue. The sky blue and yellow light cast over her just barely, like the last glimmer of magic left with an angel on earth. You know, Elijah, I've had fights like this before, Astrid began, looking at the park. But it doesn't mean we don't love each other. Sometimes I don't give him credit for how he helps me. Same could be said for him, but well, she trailed off. I think it'll all be okay. Ashlyn was happy Astrid had a happy marriage, but deep down inside her, the words felt like daggers in her chest. Even if Astrid doesn't love me, she reminded herself, I'm happy to be with her. I could have never seen her again. The sunset is beautiful, Ashlyn, she smiled, turning to her. Ashlyn was so close she could see all the freckles littered on Astrid's face. Ever since they met in high school, Astrid's face had lots of freckles scattered across her face like stars that only appeared in the summertime, like little constellations. You're so beautiful, Ashlyn thought. I want to trace all the constellations on your face. I want to be with you forever. It is, Ashlyn agreed, staring up at it alongside her. They sat so close together, their shoulders were almost brushing, almost. Later that evening, as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the two women began heading back to where the car was parked alongside the road, hoping to find a hotel to sleep in. But as they approached the car, they noticed two things were different. First, the road that was bare a few hours before was jammed up with cars in every direction. A haze of blinking red and blue lights seemed to go on for miles without end. Second, there were two police officers standing nearby, talking to huge cameras mounted on reporters' shoulders and microphones. Yes, this might possibly be the biggest sinkhole in history. One of the police officers, the taller one, said grimly. Ted, he began, turning to the other officer, go down to where Leia's standing. She'll tell you how many miles she's covered. Aye, sir. Shorter man saluted and began running down a hill. Excuse me, Astrid started greeting the giant cameras with fistfuls of microphones. What's going on? Well, the police officer started taking off his hat for a second to slick back his greasy hair. Like I said, this is possibly the biggest sinkhole in human history. We're backed up for miles. We got police officers blocking it all up and police officers running around for miles telling people. And we got Fox News. He gestured to his right. CNN, he gestured to his left. Before he could finish, a woman with blonde hair and bright green pantsuit began running towards him. Hello, I'm from MSNBC News. She began excitedly. What exactly is going on here with the sinkhole? As he repeated the information to her, each reporter wide-eyed, wielding their microphone like a weapon. Astrid and Ashlyn looked to each other with shock. What do we do now? Astrid mouthed to Ashlyn. In the end of the traffic jam was so severe that it was blocked for miles upon miles, and there was no way to go north without hitting the sinkhole. They decided to sleep in the car for the night and make a plan for the next day. So after a surprisingly tasty meal of pancakes from the nearby diner, the duo went back to the top of the hill to their car and amidst the ongoing sinkhole chaos tried to go to sleep. 2:03 a.m. Ashlyn flicked on the radio, turning the dial until she was greeted with an unfamiliar station and a soft bittersweet song she'd never heard before. It's the kind of station she would only hear once or twice in her life, only at night, playing songs that were beautiful that she would never hear again. And that was okay, because everything in this moment was so fragile and beautiful, like a flower crown about to be swept away by the wind. She kept feeling her mind drifting to other topics like Estrid's husband and the new adopted kids and their life together. She needed to focus now. 3 a.m. What was the point of this life? Xenia found herself asking herself over and over. Before she was living for her son, but there was no sign she was a mother anymore. Her stomach, once holding life inside, was thin from the lack of food Xenia had grown accustomed to. How old would he be now? 3? 4? Time had gone fuzzy and unrelentless, and all Xenia could rely on was the seasons. But sometime it would grow bitterly cold, but the clouds would remain full and gray, or would grow sickly and stickily hot. But something in her still felt like it had frozen over. The only constant in Xenia's life was the blood spill, the constant stream of a life lost again and again and again. Life had become something that was easily thrown away. No one knew or cared if you were a mother, father, or child. There was only swords jabbed in the necks of faces and legs. The last time it had snowed, Xenia felt like herself. She had never killed. Before 10 a.m., as Estrid slept, her chest rose up and down, and her hair fell around her like an inky waterfall mixed with glimmering streaks of white. Ashlyn wasn't sure if it was dyed, just like in high school, or if it was a sign of age. Ashlyn didn't care. She was Astrid, and Astrid was beautiful. The windows of the car were open, and Ashlyn reached out to her hands, letting the cold night air cool around her fingers. After all this time, the starry sky was soft and close again. 5 o'clock a.m. Ashlyn gazed at Astrid until the sky had faded from ink to fire to snow, until all her tears were dried and the music on the radio turned to static. Eventually Astrid's eyelids fluttered open, her eyes the color of coffee with lots of cream and sugar. She reached out her hand to open the car door, slowly getting out of the car and into the pitchy core of the white-skied early morning. The grass was dewy and the air had a slight chill. The cars jammed around them had disappeared, leaving only a few on the outskirts of Ashlyn's vision, driving down the faraway hills and away until it disappeared into bigger and better things on the highway. Ashlyn got out of the car, her limbs a bit numb from not moving for so long. Exhausted from staying up so late, only the snippets of songs playing on the radio stayed with her, and they were already fading fast like a dream dissolving with the rhythm of ordinary life. She stood on a hill a few feet away from Astrid, looking up at the sky. It almost looked like a blank slate, but in reality it was the opposite. It was so clouded the blue couldn't come through the cracks. Xenia died with a sword staked through her heart, her silhouette collapsed and sticking out at odd angles like a broken toy against the blazing sunrise. Eventually the two women got back into the car and began driving south. It was so silent, all you could hear was the soft thrum of the car and the slight scratching of Ashlyn's pencil on paper. "We're going home," Astrid said softly. It sounded so final it would almost make Ashlyn want to cry. What chance did she have with her? What was even the point? Life wasn't a road trip, and Astrid wasn't going to leave her life behind. Ashlyn could taste the bitter coffee of tomorrow and could feel the salty tears that would fall down her face. Staring out the window of the hotel and seeing a sea of buildings, everything would be back to normal, except wouldn't it be worse? Because after all this time, they were so close and everything was almost perfect. One of the king's servants sent home a letter of Xenia's death to her family. Her parents had assumed she was dead, of course, because of the absence of letters, but the dull ache that came after the letter was worse. There wasn't even the slightest sliver of hope, just a tangible piece of paper that said your daughter's dead in a lot of flowery language that made her mom want to scream. Why did she stop writing them letters? Was she too frail, or did she die valiantly in battle? Did she not care about them, or was it something else? Ashlyn looked up at the windshield as Astrid drove. First raindrops of an approaching storm sliding across the glass. Neither of them was ever going home again. And that was Almost Always Home Final thoughts? Very interesting how they ended it that way. Okay, so they're going home, but they're not. So is this person planning to actually commit suicide, or what's going on here with that? Or is it that the sinkhole in the story has prevented them from going anywhere else, back toward where they came? And moreover, what did it swallow? Where did the other cars go? Is this all just a vivid dream of what's happening, induced by fatigue? But that being said, I can see where it would have made the front page with such vagueness and symbolism going for it like that. With that, I bring us to our last story, Early Morning Sun, by Vincenzia Fasulo, submitted for contest number 98 in response to write a story involving a character who cannot return home. It's a coming-of-age sad story. Looks like it's pretty short, too. It's only a few pages. My plane lands on schedule despite the early morning rain. Time passes slowly as I get off the plane, collect a suitcase that has my tag on it, and buy a small bag of overpriced trail mix and a cup of coffee to have on hand for the long drive ahead of me. I glance around all of the different types of people who have come through the airport. Families who are excited and frazzled before going on vacation, lovers some embracing before saying goodbye, others traveling together attached at the hip, solo businessmen doing whatever businessmen do, taking phone calls mostly, seasoned travelers totally prepared, maybe even overpacked for the journey to come. I wonder if any of them have gone through what I'm going through right now. In the early morning rain, I leave the airport and trudge through the parking lot to my car. Despite the appearance of one heavy suitcase in my hand, I'm carrying an even heavier heart too. In the early morning rain, I feel lost and disoriented even though I'm exactly where I am. I feel like I have no place to go. Being a very long way from home and not feeling too positively about it. In the early morning rain, I look up to the great big sky, feeling stuck here on the ground. I glance towards and listen to the mighty jet engines roar overhead. All I can think about is Mom, especially during this early morning rain, and I think about how much she loved the rain, and how much she used to hold me in her lap on the front porch steps to watch the lightning break across the sky. I remember her squeezing me when the thunder rumbled and threatened, and laughing as the rain drew down from the sky in buckets. I think about how now she's in a place where the rain doesn't fall. The early morning rain lands on my face and mixes with my tears. Her funeral is long over and I've come back to the city where I live by myself. I thought I would feel better about coming home to my lovely little apartment rather than staying in the local motel. But I figured out wherever I am, hotel, motel, apartment, house, I will never feel at home again, just as long as she's gone. Approaching my car, my thoughts are interrupted. I can hear something near the front wheel. It almost sounds like quacking. Oh, no. I carefully drop my suitcase and kneel down towards the source of the noise. A tiny baby duck is crouched there, quacking nonstop. Where's your family? He shivers, glancing around, holding his little wings close. The duck apparently has no idea. He looks cold, or terrified at least. I glance around the area too. Come up with the same result. No other ducks or ducklings in sight. I can't just leave the baby duck out here, alone and freezing in the early morning rain. So after some contemplating, I search the car's back seat and then the car's trunk, where I find a slightly crushed shoebox that hold my funeral shoes. I take the shoes out and rearrange the tissue paper, taking care to place some airport trail mix in the corner of it. I carefully hold on to the rest in my hand, in front of the duck, to coax him into the box. He hops in faster than I expect him to. I put his shoebox in the passenger seat of my car and go. Together we drive around through all the airport parking lots in the early morning rain. I glance around looking for any duck families or duck mamas or duck siblings sitting in the grass on the pavement. I see none. The duck in my car relaxes a bit, enjoys his trail mix, and seems to be warming up after I put his heated seat on. After what feels like hours of searching, I park my car on the side of one of the many airport parking lots drenched in the early morning rain. I feel exhausted from my red-eye flight, and I just want to go back to my apartment and cry. I place my head in my hands, my thoughts spiral. The world has turned completely upside down in just a week. How can I just go back to my apartment and live life like I did before? Who will I call when I have a funny story or just need to cry? Who will send me notes and brownies in the mail? Whose house will I stay in when I go back to my hometown? Why would I ever go back to my hometown now? In the middle of this meltdown, I take a quick glance at the duck. He looks back at me, feathers slightly damp, his big brown eyes wide. In the early morning rain, I decide that I have to keep looking for this duck's family. I have time, and this is an important cause to me today, especially today. So we drive around some more. The early morning rain, sun starts peeking through the dark clouds, disturbing the early morning rain. I slowly approach a grassy ditch. Water is collected at the bottom, and in it, one mother duck and 3 little siblings. All 3 of them look just like the duck I have in the car, enjoying his trail mix in my slightly crushed shoebox. I carefully step out of the car with the shoebox and set it on the wet grass. He hops out just as quickly as he hopped in and makes a mad dash to his mother. She quacks at him and does not look pleased. I laugh at that and wonder if the duckling has a mischievous streak. Once reunited, they all waddle off to wherever ducks waddle off to, disappearing in the early morning rain. After letting him go, I feel a little bit lighter. As I start to drive the long way back home, the early morning rain is gone. I feel at peace. And that was Early Morning Sun. Final thoughts? A short but very sweet piece, it's really beautiful in every way, just giving that essence of what family is, and what it can mean to different people. That regardless of who or what we are, we all came from one, as long as we're alive to tell of it. And while family can be good or bad, for those of us who are blessed to have one that cares about us, remember, you're one of the lucky ones. Those that don't would kill to have what you do. Maybe not literally, but still. Anyway, this has been Sadurdays, episode 15, our season finale. Thank you for tuning in. All stories can be found in the description below, and as well as my website with my current, merch offerings, and you also can follow me on social media and let me know what you think about the show. With that, I bid you farewell, and hopefully this video has helped you reinvigorate your emotions. All right, bye-bye.